to Madison City School principals sent letters home to families this weekend warning students about potential consequences if they participate in this week's planned walkout to protest ICE. It's left many students and parents wondering if students are actually protected under the First Amendment when they protest, or if schools can punish them for walking out. Let's verify. Student protests have been making headlines across the country. From walkouts over gun violence to immigration enforcement, students are using their voices to demand change. But some schools in the Madison City School District have sent letters home warning students about possible consequences. So, are student protests protected under the First Amendment? Let's verify. Our sources are the U.S. Supreme Court, the American Civil Liberties Union, and local attorney Eric Artrip, who specializes in First Amendment rights. Here's what Eric had to say.
Student-led protests and student speech in general is protected, generally speaking, under the First Amendment to the U.S. Constitution. So it's all federal law, and states can impose greater protections on speech, but the First Amendment of the U.S. Constitution is the floor, if you will, for the whole nation.
That protection comes from the Supreme Court's 1969 landmark decision in Tinker versus Des Moines. In that case, students were suspended for wearing black armbands to school to protest the Vietnam War. The court ruled that students do not, quote, shed their constitutional rights to freedom of speech or expression at the schoolhouse gate, end quote. But those rights aren't unlimited. According to Eric, students do have a right to protest in politics, but administration officials can inhibit those rights under certain conditions.
State officials or school officials can step in and limit a student's right to protest under 3 grounds, where there's advocating for prohibited activity such as illegal activity, when something might infringe on the rights of other students like hate speech, and then if something causes a substantial disruption to the school's operations.
But what counts as a substantial disruption isn't always clear. Eric says it often comes down to the view of the federal judge hearing the case. Now, here's where walkouts get complicated. According to the American Civil Liberties Union, a school walkout is not considered the same type of speech as wearing a political slogan. Schools may take corrective action if students miss school without an excused absence, even if they were participating in a political protest. So while students have the right to protest, they don't have the right to skip class without consequences. But here's the critical part. Schools cannot discipline students for a walkout more harshly than for other unexcused absences. What that means in practice, if a student would get detention for skipping class to go to the mall, they can get detention for skipping class to protest. But the school can't give a harsher punishment just because they disagree with the protest message. The punishment has to be the same as any other unexcused absence, regardless of what the students are protesting about. So we can verify that yes, student protests are protected under the First Amendment, but schools can still discipline students for missing class as long as those consequences are applied fairly and don't discriminate based on the message of the protest. If you have something you want us to verify, text us at 256-382-2692.